and welcome to Commodity Champions. I'm Anisha Gupta, and we are looking at what's brewing in the commodity space. And the grass is greener on the agri sector, which has shown positive growth in the previous quarter. Exports have also surged considerably, growing not only from the months of March to June, but also for the month of July. A record food grain production has contributed to this rise, along with deregulation of agri markets. Amendments of Essential Commodities Act and price assurance to the farmers also aided the exports. In addition to this, there is a rise of agripreneurship, and that has streamlined services like transportation, real-time monitoring and quality testing, aiding the farmers. In a bid to encourage such agri startups, the government has invested 11.85 crore rupees in 112 agri startups and intends to invest about 37 crores more. But as the pandemic continues to weigh on the economy, what is the road ahead for these agri startups, and what stimulus does the sector need as a whole? Joining me now to discuss all of that and more are Avinash BR, CEO and co-founder of Clover; Prasanna Rao is Managing Director at Arya Collateral; and Pankaj Khandelwal is Chairman and Managing Director at INI Farms. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining in. It really has been quite a year, because even as all the other sectors have seen a decline, agriculture was the only sole sector which actually saw a growth, not just in sense of production, but also in sense of exports. And we have seen this year see a lot of growth come in for the agri-tech startups as well, with the kind of money that some of these have been able to raise actually has been quite unprecedented. So that really is going to be my first question, and I want to start with you, Prasanna. How are you looking at the sector to begin with, and what is your sense on the COVID impact that this sector has seen? Prasanna, your audio is on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I think, the overall impact, while it has thrown a bit of a challenge across markets, but in terms of agriculture, it has been positive. It has impacted, and as we have seen the numbers, agriculture happens to be the only sector where we see the silver lining here. And I think post-COVID, the thrust on agriculture and the visibility of agriculture as a sector has really grown and gone up. And that is where we see that, when we hear about the positive inputs around the record Kharif harvest as well, the expected Kharif harvest as well, one feels very encouraged. But at the same time, this also throws in a bit of a challenge, because higher output does not always mean greater financial returns for the farmers. So a lot needs to be done on the post-harvest side to make sure that the returns really accrue to the different stakeholders, and especially to the farmers and the producers there. And I think that is where, somewhere people will have to look a little beyond just production and look at the entire post-harvest ecosystem as to how one would be able to store the produce so that the farmers need not sell in distress or need not sell immediately. At the same time, there has to be inputs around finance to make sure that they are encouraged to store without being cash trapped and without really strapping their cash flows. And at the end, the entire focus around market linkages so that they're able to sell their produce at the most attractive prices at the most appropriate time. So I think, somewhere we'll have to look at all of these aspects in an integrated manner to be able to really reap the real harvests as a result of the record Kharif output that we expecting.
Prasanna, also you are with fruits, and India is the second largest producer of fruits, as it were. What has been your experience, and what would you ask the government now with the kind of situation we're in?
I think, while in terms of our business, fruits forms a smaller part of our overall ecosystem, I think the colleagues or the other panelists would be in a much better position to sort of, throw more light on that. But, with whatever little that we do around fruits, I think, the whole thing around ensuring that it can be stored and the real value of that can be realized would be very, very important, because it's in fruits and vegetables, the most important aspect would be around addressing the challenge around immediate sale, because these are commodities, these are produce which cannot really be transported to longer distances. So once you have a greater production in a smaller area and that production comes in, it really deflates prices. So it's important that a short-term kind of storage which ensures quality sort of is retained is going to be an important aspect. But I think Pankaj and Avinash would be in a much better position to throw more light on this.
Absolutely. Pankaj, my next question really was coming to you in that sense. What has been your experience, especially in this year, and what kind of a growth are you looking at on year-on-year basis? Because as we've been discussing, this year perhaps has been the best for agriculture. The year-on-year numbers do show that.
That's right, Manisha. So overall, last year, as an organization, we grew about 70%. And this year, we are looking at a growth of about 30%. So yes, there's been an impact primarily in quarter 1. In the initial parts, there were disruptions in the supply chain that led to this. But overall, our own expectation of growth is about 30% year-on-year basis. So we are looking at a significant amount of growth even now.
Avinash, a similar kind of question to you. You are into a greenhouse agri-tech startup. Technology and agriculture, I mean, that has been in conversation for a longest time. I know when I was reporting 3 or 5 years back, there wasn't so much to talk about agri-tech in that sense. We were still talking about monsoons and fertilizers and better quality of seeds, etc. But this really seems to be a buzzword, and rightly so, because there are so many agri-techs now. The government is paying attention to this part also. First question to you, do come out with your experience on how this year has treated you.
So I think we went through the same turmoil that maybe Pankaj and Prasanna went through in the early days of COVID. But what we've clearly seen is on both sides of the spectrum, farmers and consumers, especially on the farmer side, maybe structured market access is clearly standing out, right? There are these lot of nighttime flyers, if you will, trying to procure from the farmers, one-time, opportunistic, etc. But what COVID has made is sort of clean up that field, and clearly people who truly want to work with the farmers, structurally providing agronomy service, helping them improve their yield and productivity, and obviously remunerate them with the right prices, only those players will emerge as the survivors, if you will, post-COVID. And farmers are clearly beginning to see that. Similarly, on the consumer side, what we are seeing is there is this heightened sense of awareness about where they're buying their fruits and vegetables from. Hopefully, it has not gone through a mandi. Where was it grown? Was clean water used, etc. Right? So I think people who are looking at structurally solving the problems along the supply chain will truly stand out. Will not have to worry about what happens post-COVID, and stakeholders, both farmers and consumers, will benefit from that. While we saw our volumes reduced by, I think, more than 50% during COVID, I think from May to probably now, I think our volumes have increased by 4 times, right? So there has been an abundant inflow of farmers wanting to partner with us because they realize it's not about agronomy service, it's not about technology, it's not about just picking up the produce, but it's the entire holistic thing that we do with the farmers. So we are seeing a healthy inbound of farmers. Obviously, the bridge to the consumers is what we are building, strengthening, and I think, as you rightly said, grass is greener on the other side. But we still have to watch out for in our area of business, because there is physical movement of goods and people, right? So that's where we are today, I would say.
Oh, well, Avinash, I said the grass is greener on this side. Well, that is what the agri sector really has been. But this one, again, is to you, Avinash. And while it is heartening to know that the farmers are trusting the agri-tech startups, they are partnering here, is it more about B2B or is it about B2C? Because that we saw that happen during the pandemic as well. And then how are you looking at the other buzzwords like quality, consistency, traceability? Because that is what most consumers wanted.
So to your first question, I think, yes, obviously B2B business has got decimated. Although now we are operating in Bangalore and Hyderabad, we are beginning to see emergence of B2B demand. But I think it's anybody's guess in this panel as to when the demand will come back to its baseline and also what the new baseline would be. So we work with a lot of modern trade, modern retailers, as well as general trade kirana partners, as well as we do direct to consumers. So that way we are fairly, I would say, hedged in terms of our exposure to B2B. Point number two, I think it's a great question. Today, I think there are lot of non-linear entrants selling fruits and vegetables because that seems to be the only business that one can do today. So a lot of words like traceability, hygiene, clean, etc. is being used. Our own consumer research says they are fairly skeptical about things like traceability, cleanliness, organic, etc. when they hear it. Right. As I said, I think once the air of COVID clears, I think people who are truly structurally trying to do things around traceability, growing the produce in a clean manner, not dousing it with chemicals and pesticides, right, ensuring the right amount of freshness and shelf life from farm to fork, I think only they will stand out. Agreed today that there is a whole lot of buzzword around traceable, clean produce. How much of it is truly that? Anybody's guess, really, again.
Okay. Prasanna, you've had a tech platform to book warehouses, which is called A to Z Godam. I know because, I've been reporting on commodities and warehouses and the way it has been happening, silos to governments push towards that as well. How has that platform worked for you? Do you see a lot of listings on this? And what commodities really are you beginning with here?
I think this particular initiative has been extremely timely, especially in the backdrop of COVID and the new regulations that have come up. We've seen a sharp increase in the number of listings of warehouses. In fact, in the last budget, the finance minister spoke about geotagging all agriculture warehouses in the country, and I think this is the way to go. We have to ensure that the visibility around storage, and especially in the context of warehouses acting as mandis and as transaction points, it is extremely important to really increase the visibility of warehouses across the country. And as I mentioned, we've seen a very, very sharp increase in the interest amongst individual warehouse owners who are otherwise mostly invisible, increasing on the platform. And what we're trying to do on the platform is to try and integrate all services around it. That is, if you actually are looking for a warehouse, you should be able to see what the warehouse actually provides to you. It should also try and bring out to you financing options against the produce that you store in a warehouse, because without finance, storage is incomplete. And at the same time, we've also brought in transporters, preservation agencies, insurance companies, all together on one particular platform. So when an entity wants to store the produce, can actually access all of these services on one platform. And at the same time, the stored produce at some point in time needs to be sold. And what the platform really does is to bring together a marketplace which really connects different buyers to entities who store their produce and at some point in time want to sell it. And we've also seen a sharp increase in those transaction volumes as well. So I really think, as I was mentioning to you earlier as well, it is, and Avinash also touched upon it, that it's an integrated offering which is really needed in today's environment. And technology is the only thing that can really democratize, all of these services and bringing them together on one particular platform.
Well, clearly, and that really seems to the push right now as well. And funding, I want to just stick to that for some time right now. And Pankaj, today we heard that there has been a revised private sector lending guidelines that we've seen coming in today, targeting the small and marginal farmers. Higher credit limit has been specified for FPOs and farmer producer organizations as well. How do you look at this? And is the funding enough? Would you want the government to do more in this sector?
So there are multiple elements to this, Manisha. At the end of the day, funding helps a lot. However, we still have fairly less number of FPOs who are organized, have the track record to actually be able to organize the farmers and be able to deliver the kind of financial and the non-financial support that farmers need. So while, yes, there's a lot of effort that has been going on from the government side, there's a lot of issues in terms of the management of the FPOs that still needs to be worked on. It's a process. It will take some time for it to really start to deliver results on the ground. But at the end of the day, that's going to be an important issue. At the same time, I think from a government, when you are asked, there are a whole lot of things that still needs to be done at the government level, which starts, for exports, for example, there's been a lot of uncertainty with respect to export subsidies. Right now, that's something that has been going on for a while, and there's lack of clarity, there's lack of visibility as to what's going to happen after December, what's the funds that are going to be made available. So there is a whole lot of funding that also needs to be released, because unless that is released and it flows into the system, there are problems across the supply chain, right? So it's not just FPOs, because at the end of the day, FPOs have very limited capability to absorb this kind of capital. In fact, the more important thing is to provide support to the businesses, which is what my belief is, and what I think the government needs to do much more.
Pankaj, also, how would you look at, I mean, I do understand that with nearly 450 plus agri-tech, startups that we have seen mushroom right now, there is a lot that needs to be done. There is a lot that is being done right now. But how are you looking at the monitoring, analysis, communication, right from monsoon to soil to cropping to post-harvest? There is just so much to be done. How would you, quantify it on what difference has it actually made on ground?
So, see, technology fundamentally is going to be a massive game changer as far as the Indian context is concerned. So to give you a very simple example, today we work very extensively with about 5,000 farmers. Now, without technology, it's impossible for me to manage, get the entire processes, production systems, monitoring, because we need a certain standard of quality, food safety standards, traceability. That's a mandatory requirement for us. Avinash, when he was talking about traceability, for example, was in the Indian context, whether the consumer cares about it or not. For us as an export business, it's a basic and a fundamental requirement that is absolutely mandatory. Now, these are the situations where technology comes in extremely handy. So we have recently launched the entire QR code program called Fruit Loop. The core of it is, how does consumer actually starts to trust you when you say that I'm providing traceability, right? It is not just about traceability, the entire ecosystem associated with it, interaction with farmers, how do you prove that the fruit is actually safe, the entire communication technologies. We've been having our entire farmer engagement program over Zoom links, over Microsoft Teams. None of our work has stopped, primarily because technology was available. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible for us to continue to grow, because we continue to engage very, very deeply with farmers, right? So whether it is from a communication point of view, from a monitoring of SOPs point of view, our own interaction and transactions with the farmers, for us, everything has moved into technology. So without technology, I don't think large-scale organizations can be created. And for our own success, I would actually say that technology has played a massive role. Today we are already the largest exporters of pomegranates, bananas, fresh cuts out of India. And without technology, I really don't think this kind of scale would have been created.
Absolutely, yes. A lot of numbers can be attributed to that. But gentlemen, we'll have to take a pause here, go for a break. When we come back, we'll have all the forward-looking statements coming in from our guests. Welcome back. You're on Commodity Champions, and the reports do suggest that in 2019, $244 million is what the agri-tech funding was, which was 350% higher year-on-year basis. So clearly it has been on the higher side, and the agri-startup number itself has been growing 25% year-on-year. This basically is about last couple of years right now. But Prasanna, how do you look at the sector now? The pandemic, we perhaps are in the thick of it, or is it behind us? Is the worst over? Going forward, what is the outlook now?
Manisha, I think, this has really opened up a huge opportunity. And I think, not just about agriculture as a sector, but all the entities have really shown a certain kind of resilience. And it is that resilience which is really proving to the world that this is one sector, this is one particular industry that could really stand any challenge. And, we all know, humanity cannot survive without food. And that's the basic need. Now, what is the need of the day is to ensure that we become more efficient as we go by, so that we are able to address the key challenges that are the realities of the country that we live in. So, the whole idea is that this pandemic has really proven that organizations that work in an integrated manner, addressing these very basic challenges, can make a huge difference. And that is where we see increased investments coming in, which is extremely positive. The new priority sector guidelines coming in, which are supporting not just different initiatives which enhance reach of finance to smaller entities or farmers. It also encourages financing and supporting startups and new enterprises. So I think it's a very, very exciting time to be in, and I'm really fortunate that we are there to be able to address these challenges during this very, very unprecedented time. But at the same time, the adversities brings up opportunities, and I think that's where we are. It really helps us think more about how do you make this happen. As an organization, for example, 80% of our business happens to be in the smaller rural markets, which are the primary and secondary markets, which are closest to the farm gate, where we address the small scale needs of individual farmers and FPOs and small aggregators, which are about 1/10 the normal size of what other entities or larger entities do. So the basic opportunity that this really throws up is, to be able to showcase yourself in diversity. And I think that's where, I think all of us here on the panel and otherwise, the entire, team of startups and agri enterprises, agri startups really stand up to that opportunity.
Well, that point is well taken. Taking it from where Prasanna has left it, Avinash, how would you look at the space? I mean, one thing that I remember reading from a government report was that it is also an employment generator, that being one part of it. What are your own plans going forward? Do you see the fundings continue to pour in as they have in the past?
Yes, I think we are already sort of seeing that agri-tech is the flavor of the season, if you will. And even if not COVID, I think the next natural wave of investments was sort of moving from other sectors. Not moving, but actually focused on agri-tech. So I think I believe we will continue to see that. I sort of echo what Prasanna said, that the opportunity is huge. The problem statements are diverse. Right? More number of players coming in, having a crack at the problem in different ways is actually great. Right? Like, for instance, between Pankaj, Ayana and our clover, right? The intersection of common produce that we are handling is zero, right? So he is focused on a completely different set of produce and problem statements, and we are, right? So I think we will continue to see this momentum. Right, and I think people who take an integrated approach, trying to solve structural problems, basic problems, I think we'll see the light at the end of the day, actually.
Okay, I like the way you call it the flavor of the season. It clearly is that, and this is the only scenario which is buzzing right now. But Pankaj, what is your sense? Because we've seen redesigning of the farming ecosystem. There is the agri landscape of India really seems to be in for a change, the way the agri tech startups are working on. How are you looking at artificial intelligence, data analytics, remote sensing? I mean, do you see more penetration of this going forward?
No, absolutely, Manisha, that's going to happen. What has happened is that over the last few years, the entrepreneurs who have come in have actually started to understand agriculture first before technology. Right? Technology is extremely critical, but this is a sector where technology cannot disrupt unless you understand agriculture first. And in that particular context, Avinash also mentioned the kind of problems you're solving, the solutions that technology is going to provide is going to be very, very different. So demand-supply mapping, for example, is going to be such a huge issue where the entire satellite imaging, artificial intelligence, ability to predict how much pomegranate is going to come up in India 3 months later, and therefore what kind of pricing systems should one expect, and how do you harvest, how do you take care of your plans going forward. These are really new opportunities. The world has really never done anything like this before. And we are there, from a technology perspective, from agriculture know-how perspective, from the ability to store the fruit, the ability to transport the fruit to long distances. There's so many things that have come together, which are actually going to drive the efficiencies to an order we have never seen before. And this is a very, very large organized play that I'm talking about today. agriculture has always been very important for India. The difference is that we don't have $1 billion organization today, right? And I see that happening now. Over next 5 years to 7 years, you'll start to see first $1 billion organizations focused primarily on agriculture coming up in India. And technology is going to play a massive, massive role in that. And that's where your point that you were asking earlier with respect to investments, that's what is happening and that's what's going to drive the investments. Estimates are that India needs something like $800 billion of investment into agriculture sector. And a large part of it has to come from private equity, venture capital funds. And you'll see a massive growth on that particular side.
Well, amen to all of that you said, Pankaj. Yes, agriculture needs that and much more. And congratulations to all of you for all the efforts that you are putting as agri-tech startups there. Yes, it has been the flavor of the season, and wishing you more growth and better development in the agriculture sector. But with that, that's all the time that we have on the show. Pankaj, Prasanna, Avinash, thank you so much for joining us here on Commodity Champions. That's all the time that we have on this episode, but you continue to watch CNBC TV 18.